Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Jim, and thank you, everyone, for having me here. It's a great privilege to be with you at your inaugural session, and congratulations on a great day one, don't you think? I think it's been fantastic. You know, I was talking to a few people outside, and someone said to me that they thought I was pretty distinctive, even in this group. And, of course, I was quite flattered, until he said that it isn't every day that someone who's interested in business and opportunity flies from California to Texas with a round-trip ticket. Now, I got to tell you, I am a California girl, and nothing's ever going to change that. I do love dearly my home state. But I have to tell you, I admire very much and appreciate the reverence for free markets and competition here in Texas. And I want to thank the proudest Texan of all, President Bush, for having me here. Before offering his leadership to our nation and the world, Governor Bush brought some common sense policies and bold initiatives to Texas, including things like smart investments in education, more local control, tort reform that became a national model, and a $2 billion tax cut that stimulated the Texas economy, created more jobs, opportunity, and investment. And we should be so lucky to have this kind of common sense approach in California. Hey, I tried. In fact, it is good to see that this event is open to the press, and the proceedings will be broadcast for wider viewership. After the money I spent on my California campaign, I'm really happy to accept some free media. So I'm very excited to be here, and I'm very excited about the focus of this gathering, because I very much share the belief that finding ways to create sustainable economic growth is at the heart of what we must do in America. Achieving a 4% growth rate is absolutely the right goal, because without robust growth, nothing else is possible. Think about it for a minute. Without growth, there's no social contract. There's no American dream. There's no ability to take care of those who really do need it. There's no security for our seniors. There's no ability to help our friends abroad or further the cause of democracy and human rights around the world. You know, having spent my career in business and then the last 3 years in politics, maybe I bring a little bit of a unique perspective to this gathering, because not many have combined a career in the cradle of innovation, Silicon Valley, with a firsthand view of the political realities. I want to tell you this. It will not be easy, but we can do this. We can restore America's growth. But first, as a people, we have got to take a hard look at the conditions we face and acknowledge that we're in a bad place right now. Here's one way, and perhaps a little bit of a different way to think about this. All of us are investors in America, aren't we? No matter where we live or what we do, how well or poorly the U.S. performs matters to us and affects our life every single day, and it matters a lot. And if the U.S. were a company, how would we as investors feel about our situation today? Well, anyone that believes in safety in numbers hasn't taken a realistic look at our country's financials. Case in point, beyond the especially damaging effects of the last couple of years, the country's cash flow has been negative for 9 consecutive years. Last year, cash flow was a negative $1.3 trillion, or almost $11,000 a household. Cumulative cash flows over that period amount to a staggering $4.8 trillion. Now, what negative cash flows mean, of course, is that the country simply cannot afford the services that it's providing. Another staggering statistic, the country's net worth is now a negative $44 trillion. To many Americans, the challenge has become even more evident in the discussion of our national debt crisis. Right now, more than $14 trillion and ticking like a fiscal time bomb. Within 10 years, the interest alone on our debt could reach $1 trillion a year. Now, companies with similar financial characteristics or financial trends would be pressed to pursue what we call a turnaround, a major change in behavior, a mandate to get our fiscal house in order. And every American needs to understand this as investors in how well this country really does. Now, what would this bottom line business perspective mean in the household experience? If a family spent more money than it took in every year for the past 9 years, its net worth had been negative for as long as that family could remember, and it would take 20 years of income at current levels to pay off existing debt, assuming that family took on no more new debt, well, someone in that household is going to push real hard for some serious behavior modification. Now, in the California household, I suppose I was that someone pushing hard for the changes that we so desperately need out there. I had hoped to bring some common sense governance to our Golden State because I knew that California is not only in trouble, but also likely to be a drag on the nation's recovery. The U.S. simply cannot fully recover from the recession if California is mired in a budget crisis, historic levels of debt, high unemployment, and creeping GDP growth rate, given that California represents more than 13% of the United States economy. And there wasn't very much that was extravagant in my plan, just some fundamental precepts and, in many cases, some simple old remedies, like don't spend more money than you take in, and get government spending back to what we can afford. Compete for jobs. We should be fighting like mad to keep every single job we have and get every new job that we can. And understand that education gets better when we stop thinking not only about how much we spend, but how we spend that money. If there's one thing that the California experience has taught everyone, it's that the roots of fiscal disaster are actually likely to be found in good times, not bad ones. And reckless, permanent commitments that were made over many years of a booming economy in California has created some serious structural gaps. And now our fiscal forecast is for budget deficits of more than $20 billion a year for the foreseeable future. On top of the budget calamity are a host of other problems. Some were related to the fiscal mismanagement and some were derivative. But listen to this. Pension benefits for California's oversized government workforce are costing taxpayers more than $3 billion a year, up from just $300 million a few years ago, and well on their way to $4 billion. We have more unemployed Californians than the population of 15 individual states. And our schools rank near the bottom in math and reading and science. And the list goes on and on and on. Now, don't get me wrong. As I said before, I love California. I would not live anyplace else. And I found it a magical place when I was a little girl and came to California as a 6-year-old. And I still feel the same way. But the problem with California and our nation, in my view, is what the political class is doing to it. Fiscal irresponsibility, that unbounded growth of government, has in fact made us as a people smaller. We see across our nation a crisis of confidence, a perverse belief that our problems are now greater than our capacity to solve them. But as Americans, I know we can rise to this challenge if we summon the will to face it head on and stop chipping around the edges. If we set very clear and ambitious goals, make the effort, and let our progress along the way fortify us, we will prove to ourselves once again that we can do what we resolve to do. So what should we resolve to do as Americans for America? Well, first, of course, my view is we've got to get back on track to a balanced budget. Without a balanced budget, there will be no confidence. And we need confidence to grow this economy. In fact, I would argue we need that confidence to avoid a significant double dip or a really severe shock to the economic system. And what do we need to do to get that balanced budget? We need to fundamentally rethink and reset current expense levels, which are simply too high. Now, I'm not going to focus a lot of time in today's talk on cutting costs because this is a growth conference, but I'll tell you this. If I could boil it down to a single thought, it would be get rid of a system that rewards politicians for simply spending more money. And that is the situation in which we find ourselves. And it's why we're now faced with the need for tough measures. I actually think that the Ryan budget plan is a thoughtful and very bold response to the magnitude of our long-term problems. Cutting costs is absolutely essential. But I want to step back for a second because the truth is we will not be able to cut our way to greatness. We have to jumpstart growth in this economy because the only way we're going to get back to a balanced budget is to reduce costs and grow the economy. One alone is not sufficient. And that's why what I want to do for the rest of this talk is talk about how we're going to grow revenues sustainably in the United States of America. Real economic growth is an absolutely crucial ingredient to solving our country's fundamental financial problems. But think about this. On a human level, economic growth is desperately needed to solve the very vexing problems of unemployment and to restore that American dream that has become elusive for far too many in this country. You know, America's promise, in my view, for all the dazzle of our grandest achievements, has always been found first in those who struggle and succeed. What is done to respond to their needs, to set the conditions for them to achieve, says everything about who we are and what we want as a people. Without human fulfillment on an individual level, the American enterprise is vacuous. So to jumpstart economic growth and expand that individual opportunity in America, we've got to do a couple of things. But first is we have to forge a balanced economy, robust, diversified, and hitting on all cylinders. You know, we still own many, many sectors that are instrumental to a balanced economy. We lead the world in financial services, pharmaceuticals, agriculture, biotech, and of course technology and the internet, just to name a few. And technology has been an especially strong additive to this economy. At eBay, we were fortunate to be part of that explosive growth and creative destruction that marked an economic surge launched from Silicon Valley and the broader technology sector. In just 10 years, as Jim mentioned, we grew eBay from a startup to a grown-up, from 30 workers and $4.7 million in revenue to 15,000 employees and nearly $8 billion in revenue. But even more gratifying to me as the head of eBay, our growth, our very existence, spurred the creation of another 1 million small businesses. And we became part of an American tradition of expanding opportunity to those who share a passion for new ventures. But in many ways, we were really just a part of an avalanche of innovation that thrust the American economy forward and absolutely changed the world. If you think about it, companies like Yahoo, HP, Cisco, Google, Facebook, all the tech infrastructure companies, and many others are collectively Exhibit A of our capacity to own innovation in America. And we must continue to lead the world in innovation. But I will tell you that is not going to be enough. Because the success stories in technology and elsewhere obscure an emerging truth in the nation's economy. We are still a great marketplace for ideas and services, but we don't build things here like we used to. And if this continues, we are going to undermine our strength, our standing in the world economy, and that same individual opportunity to struggle and succeed that generations of Americans before us could pin their hopes to.